Hello and welcome to Dr. Kathy's Office Hours. I'm Dr. Kathy Marshack and I'm offering office hours to anyone who wants to send in a question by email. You're welcome to do so. Today I'll be talking about questions that have been sent in by people on the autism spectrum. I started office hours originally for to support my group, which is on Meetup, Asperger's Syndrome and Relationships Life with an Adult on the Autism Spectrum. And it was private, but I've opened it up to others who have read my blog or seen my other videos, been to Facebook, seen my newsletters, anybody who has, or read my books for that matter. You might have questions that, I don't know, have gone unanswered in some of the things that you've read or the video conferences you've attended. And so I welcome you to send in questions to Dr. Kathy's Office Hours. You just go to my website, kmarshack.com, and fill out the form. I will answer your questions to the best of my ability, and I will keep your identity anonymous, so no worry about that. Today, I'm going to talk about the kinds of questions that I get typically from autistic people who are willing to ask those questions wholeheartedly because they really want to get what on earth is going on with their neurotypical loved ones and why their relationships seem to be, stuck or stressful. Typically, I'm answering questions for the neurotypical person, but I actually do get quite a few questions from those on the autism spectrum, so I thought I'd round them up for this particular office hours and answer them for you. Now, the first one is probably the best one to kind of summarize where we're going here. This person asked, what's neurodiverse mean? I get it, but why are we using that term? So neurodiverse means that you've got a couple or a family where there are neurotypical members and people on the autism spectrum. This term can also apply to other types of neurodiversity, but I'm talking specifically about autism, spectrum disorders, and people in relationship with people on the spectrum. So neurodiverse implies that there's just lots of different ways for people to be wired, and autism is just one of them, and it's perfectly reasonable to be wired that way. Yes, I suppose that's true. The problem is with that term, because it's sort of politically correct, I think it leaves autistic people out in the cold without any answers to how to interact with their neurotypical loved ones. And I think it also leaves the neurotypical loved ones out in the cold, because if both sides are just different and we're supposed to accept those differences, well, then how do you cross over and understand what's going on there? Because both sides use very, very different structures and content and verbal cues and tools to communicate. So if you're just supposed to accept it, and this is just neurodiverse, I don't think it works very well. On the other hand, if we can use that term now with the idea that we need to translate into the other person's language or use an interface protocol, which is something one of my autistic clients came up with. He coined that term, interface protocol, with regard to understanding his neurotypical wife. Well, if we can build an interface protocol, then that neurodiversity kind of makes more sense. It's okay, obviously, to be different, and it's fun. It's interesting. We learn from people that are different than ourselves. But if we don't understand what that style of communication is all about, we can become quite distressed about it. We can become angry and hurt, and that's the kind of thing that I'm dealing with. We need to go beyond just coming up with a label and saying, gosh, I'm in a neurodiverse relationship. We need to go to the level of really understanding how I can be true to myself and still be there for the other. Okay, so let's go on to the next question, which is this person is talking about the fact that his spouse is always saying to him that he doesn't listen, that she continues to try to explain herself, and he doesn't understand at all what she's talking about. So he says this is not true. I do listen. I'm a good listener. It's just that she wanders around telling all this backstory. And why won't she get to the point? Why won't she get to the point? That's what this autistic man is asking for. He's very, very bright, capable, high-functioning guy, but he doesn't understand why his wife doesn't get to the point. So I'm going to try to explain this to you autistic folks who are listening to me. She does get to the point. She gets to the point a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there. And in between, she is telling backstory. Her backstory is the setup for the point. Her backstory is the contextual cues and messages that make the point relevant. The backstory is her attempt to connect with you, to draw you into the point. So what you need to understand is that neurotypicals are always trying to connect with the person first, the topic second. Always the person first. So the backstory is an attempt to explain where I'm coming from and inviting you into my story and checking to see if you want to come into my story or if you have a variation on it. And then the neurotypical gets to the point. And then as they're talking about the point, they may weave back into the backstory again as they realize that there's something else really important to share with you. Now, the reason this is confusing is that people on the spectrum just get to the point. And sometimes it's viewed as being quite rude. Getting to the point is abrupt, because for the neurotypical, you're supposed to set the stage for that. So sometimes my autistic clients will refer to it as backstory. I had one client who referred to it as confetti. He said that his wife speaks in confetti, and he really doesn't know what all that confetti is. And when the confetti finally sifts to the ground, he can get to the point, or he can find out what on earth the point is, or if he doesn't know what the point is, he will tell her the point. Another one of my autistic clients refers to that backstory as curlicues. She says that she uses a lot of extra words when she's writing her science fiction novels, because she knows neurotypicals need all these extra words, but she doesn't really know what they are. She calls them curlicues, as opposed to setting up the stage, setting up the backstory, weaving a story that brings the person into it, attending to who that human being who is reading the story. To her, it's just curlicues, it's confetti, it's backstory. So this is a complex idea. So I want to take a little bit more time with that to help you understand that for the neurotypical, it's always about connecting to the other person first. And even if there's 3 or 4 people in the room, they'll connect with that person, and then they'll make sure that they address something over there that brings that person back into the meeting. So for the neurotypical, it's always about connecting with the other person first and then getting to the point. So sometimes they get to the point and then they notice somebody wandering off over there, so they reach over again and they make a few connecting comments, contextual issues like, oh my goodness, maybe it's time for a coffee break. Whatever, they throw things out like that because the goal is to keep everybody together and working on the point. So small talk is another example of this. I've talked about this before. Small talk is something that people on the spectrum say, what the heck's that about? They don't understand it, they don't engage in it, or they have a little bit of a small talk pattern that they've memorized and they kind of use with people, but it doesn't go very well because it's not really the point. Small talk for neurotypicals is all of those gestures, all of those little comments that attend to the person they're talking to. Commenting about what they're wearing, or how their weekend was, or that looks like their lunch looks like a great choice they made. These are little small talk gestures that are designed to help the other person feel special, attended to, noticed, and invited into the neurotypical's world. after that, after the person seems to be smiling and ready and able to be participating, then they move on to the point of the subject or the topic or whatever it is that they're talking about. Now, the problem is that autistic people think small talk, confetti, backstory, all of that is kind of a waste of time, and they wonder why people are doing it. And for neurotypicals, if you want to just get to the point, I suppose that's okay. But there's another bind for neurotypicals, because if you just get to the point and you don't affirm and acknowledge and treat your aspie loved one with care, they could be upset too. So I want you, people on the spectrum, to realize that, is that you actually do want to be invited into the story. You just don't want it to take so long. So we can talk some more about that at another Dr. Kathy's office hours, but I think that sets the stage for the remainder of the questions that people have asked me, that autistic people have asked. Because if you look at it from that perspective, that the neurotypical is speaking to the person first and then to the topic, whereas the person on the spectrum speaks to the topic and doesn't seem to notice that they need to invite the person in. When you notice that difference, the rest of this really does make sense. So let's go to the next question. The next question is really cute, is why is she always telling me what to do? Why is she always telling me what to do? She isn't always telling you what to do, but it probably has grown over time that she gets a little bit more controlling. If you think about that small talk, the curlicues, the confetti, what she does is she attempts to have a conversation with you, to suggest options. She wants your participation in a conversation about housework, let's say, or the kids. And you're not participating in that. You're just waiting for her to say what the point is. So eventually she gets frustrated because she says something like, it's been a long time since the house has been vacuumed. It really needs a good vacuuming, which is an indirect method of saying, I'd like you to help me. But you don't hear it. The autistic person doesn't hear that. They're waiting for her to say, would you please vacuum today? And then, of course, you could say yes or no, but you probably would say yes. But she implies the question. She implies the request. And because you don't notice it, or you go off and do something else, she gets frustrated, like, you're not listening to me. That's back to the original point. Why aren't you listening? So what happens is that your neurotypical partner begins to believe that you aren't listening, and that they have to nag, that they have to remind you, they have to make notes, they have to tell you what to do repeatedly. And of course, that breaks the relationship down. It's not healthy, and it's hurtful. It's hurtful. So she's always telling you what to do because you're not picking up the small talk, the curlicues, the confetti, and she thinks she's been perfectly clear. So, what I would suggest is, rather than getting mad that she's telling you what to do, maybe you could let her know that, you weren't aware that she wanted you to do that. She's probably going to blow up and say, what do you mean? I've been telling you the house needs to be vacuumed for days. And you can say, I know you've mentioned that, but remember, I'm on the spectrum and I don't really get it unless you say, please vacuum the living room. And that can help her stretch a little bit to realize that her implying things is not being picked up as part of the context of keeping the house clean. So, and in fact, I often recommend for my neurodiverse couples that there's just a list of things to do. That you have a very concrete list of assignments that each of you take care of, and that way you don't have to worry about those implied questions. Which actually leads to the next question, which I think we can spend a little bit more time on. This woman is asking, this Asperger woman is asking, What does get it mean? What does get it mean? So her husband is frequently saying to her neurotypical husband is frequently saying, you just don't get it. You just don't get me. You just don't get it. And again, this refers back to the way that neurotypicals set things up. What you're not getting is the neurotypicals need to be understood for their backstory, to be appreciated for setting it up. They're waiting for you to nod your head, to say yes, to say, oh my gosh, yes, the house needs to be vacuumed. Would you like me to do it? They're waiting for you to engage. So what this is about is for neurotypicals, conversation is everything. Conversation is a give and take. It's reciprocal. They're sending little gestures out to see if you're listening, if you're noticing, if you like me. And if you send something back that, yes, I like you, I'm noticing, then they feel like they can move ahead toward coming up with a solution to something. So for neurotypicals, everything is a conversation about connecting with the person first, the topic second. When they say you don't get it, it's because you're waiting for them to give you an assignment to get to the point, to get past the backstory and the small talk. You're waiting for that, which is legitimate if you're looking at it from an autistic point of view. But for the neurotypical, all that small talk and all that backstory is you're acknowledging it and listening to it and commenting on it is telling the neurotypical that you care about them. So when you don't acknowledge that backstory, when you treat it as if it's confetti, the message you're giving them is that they don't really count. So when they say you don't get it, what they're really meaning is you don't get me. You don't acknowledge me. You don't notice me. You don't know I'm there. I'm sending all this confetti, all this small talk, all this backstory to let you know I'm here and I want you to be with me. So when you bypass that stuff, the message you're sending them is that you don't care about them. Now, of course, this isn't true. You do care about them. So the way to cut through that you don't get it stuff is to acknowledge that I don't get it. I always tell my Asperger clients, I said, let them know that indeed you don't get all the stuff they're talking about, but you love them. You care about them. Let them know that, it's just my autistic way. I don't always notice the messages that you're trying to send me, but I care and I want to understand. If you emphasize that, the neurotypical may relax and give you a break for not understanding all the little in-between the lines stuff. So I hope that makes sense. And the last question is a very, very common one that I get from my Asperger spouses and adults on the spectrum. Why is she always trying to fix me? Why is she always trying to fix me? So, again, if you take into consideration the backstory, the contextual stuff that neurotypicals use to help them navigate the social world, what they're doing is not necessarily trying to fix you. It sounds that way to you. I get that. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. What they're doing is, what the neurotypical is doing is trying to address a problem through conversation. So they will bring up something that's amiss. Some mistake you've made, it's true. They may be bringing up a mistake you've made or something they think you need help with. And that isn't necessarily the right way to approach it, but I'm trying to help you understand the neurotypical point of view. They think you just need some help with your behavior. And so they offer a suggestion. They say, gosh, you might want to change your clothes. This is a a dinner party we're going to, and you probably don't want to wear your lawn mowing clothes. Yes, that's a fix. Yes, they're helping you with something, but I want you to think of it as that they're looking at the bigger context, and they're thinking, if you wear your lawn mowing clothes to the neighbors for dinner, um, it's just not socially appropriate, and maybe nobody will care, but she cares, and she wants you to consider it. So she is trying to fix you. She's trying to help you recognize some social graces here. And you can say, oh, I don't really care about that, um, but if it'll make you happy, I'm happy to do it. So the fixing stuff is really the neurotypical noticing the social missteps that their Asperger loved ones are making. And they may or may not be missteps. They may just be missteps according to the neurotypical, according to their sensibilities about the way it works. And so they start offering suggestions about what you might do. Now, the problem is that people on the spectrum tend to view those suggestions as criticisms, and it feels bad. It feels like, you don't, that your neurotypical partner doesn't like you, doesn't appreciate you, or they think that you're dumb. They think that you're, not with it or whatever. And so they keep offering these suggestions. That's where the nagging comes in. It does get out of balance. And I don't blame you for being frustrated that they're always trying to fix you. So what I would suggest, though, is, again, trying to keep your cool and saying things like, I'm on the spectrum. I might be missing something here, and I'm open, but could you present it in a way that's not, not so demeaning? Because a lot of times the neurotypical really will be demeaning. They'll just go, I can't believe you're going over there in your lawn mowing clothes. Or they can say, how many times have I told you to, put the lid on the peanut butter before you put it back in the fridge? So this frustration that they have is because they don't know you don't think like them. They don't know that. And so part of the work I do is trying to bring these two neurodiverse couples together to begin to understand that one person needs to get to the point and the other person needs to weave their story. One person is focusing on all those social cues as to what will be appropriate at the dinner party, and the other person is just getting ready to eat. They're different positions, they're different ways of looking at the world, and they both have value, but they can cause, these two differences can cause a lot of heartache when you don't recognize that there's something else going on here. So the bottom line is this. You can listen to Dr. Kathy's office hours, you can read my blogs, you can read my books, and learn more about your partner's way of functioning in the world. But unless you want to become an expert on this, I would take the shortcut, and I would assume a couple of things. One, I would assume that the other person means well, that they love you, and even if they're wandering around with backstory, or they're being rude and trying to figure out what the point is, trust that they mean well, that this is just coming from their method of sorting reality. And the second thing is, if you're assuming that's true, then you will offer a way to connect. You'll joke and say, oh, you know me, I'm always telling you what to do. I don't mean to do that. That's the neurotypical, right? I'm always telling you what to do because I'm in a hurry and I just think that's going to work. But of course, that's kind of rude. I'm so sorry. Or if you're on the autistic side of things, you can say, you know me, I'm autistic. I'm the last person to know what's appropriate in a social situation. Go ahead and tell me what to wear. If you can let the other person off the hook with these misunderstandings, it goes a lot better. It might take you 5 minutes more to get ready for the dinner party, but it's worth it. So thank you very much for participating in Dr. Kathy's office hours. And again, I hope you send me an email letting me know what else you'd like to know about, because I'm happy to talk again on the subject of whatever it is you send me. Just go to my website, kmarshack.com, or I think that's the best place to find where you can contact me. I also would love to have you join our meetup group if you're in a neurodiverse relationship and you're a neurotypical. This is a place where you can get support for all these questions that you have and the frustrations that you have, and learning from others who have spouses on the spectrum is pretty powerful. Alrighty, take care everybody.